The Constitution guarantees our Second Amendment rights. And these liberals like Al Gore, they're trying to take that away from us with this global warming bullshit.
So you see the two issues as related somehow?
Damn right.
The government of today has no right telling us how to live our lives because the government of 200 years ago already did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They also protected us from tyranny against the seizure of tasteful artistic photographs of beautiful bodies.
Not now, Jack.
That same government wants to come into our home, tell us what is and what is not art. That's not right.
So, this is Louis, and I am back once again to talk to you about an Ubisoft title, this one being Far Cry 6, which I've talked about already in the past because I haven't written it off. I know that some of you have because honestly, with Ubisoft, they don't have a good track record. I have purchased quite a few of their games in the recent past and for quite a while. It's pretty clear that they don't set really the quality standard, but then again, these days, who does? You know, everyone a few months ago was talking a lot of shit and saying how CD Projekt Red was going to set the bar, and for the longest time, I was trying to remain skeptical of the actual quality of the game they were going to produce. When I was at my most pessimistic, I was correct about that title and their company. And I think that at this point, everyone is really caught up to the fact that there really isn't a top-tier developer in the industry anymore. There just isn't. I know that everyone really has a soft spot for Japanese developers, but even there I disagree. I think that the content they produce is as formulaic and poorly written as anything being produced in the West. It just seems that for whatever reason people give it a pass. Irrespective of what's coming out of the East, the thing that I've always done is tried to make a split between the consideration of the content. I just don't think it's the same kind of content. It might be on the same platforms and they're both video games, but I find that it's best to just not equate the two because you'd be better off in that way. And I would say that it gives you a little bit better perspective on the content that's actually being produced and that you can actually observe and judge in some objective fashion. So hopefully more people are inclined to do that. And the reason I mention it is because with Ubisoft, they aren't necessarily the worst publisher out there. They have a really bad reputation because of putting microtransactions in their games, but out of all the different companies, I find them to be the least intrusive and the least in your face. I would say that EA is probably a better example of a company that puts unnecessary transactions, microtransactions in a game that comes out at full price, and they are just in your face about it. Ubisoft does it, but they're not as abrasive and in your face about it, and more times than not, you don't really need to even bother with them at all. You don't even need to look at them. There's games that have microtransactions, such as Far Cry 5, where, you know, if I wouldn't have thought about it, I would have never noticed it. And I think that's true for more than just that game. I think it's true for most Ubisoft games. They might have microtransactions, but they're not that big of a deal. The thing that is a greater issue with Ubisoft is quality control. They seem to have a big problem with following through on the actual vision of the game that they have. That it seems like they have a good idea for the game they're making, but their follow-through is just terrible. I mean, that's every game at this point with them. It's Far Cry 5, it's Watch Dogs Legion, it's any of the games that they've made in the last 10 years that a lot of them come with a very good premise, a very good idea, but it's the execution where it stumbles. Far Cry 5, in my opinion, is probably the best example of that, where the premise itself is very good, and as you play that game, it's an interesting game. A lot of the characters in it are entertaining, and they keep you, playing the game. In my view, at least, it's one of the positive aspects that provides you a motivation. But the issue is that for the game itself, the characters that are in it shouldn't be the reason why you're motivated to play the game. They should complement the game, but it shouldn't be the sole motivating factor for why you play it. They're not really RPGs. They're first-person shooters. It's an open-world game where you're running around shooting and, stabbing people and, doing missions and all that in an open world, driving around, getting into gunfights. It's not really a role-playing game. And one of the reasons why I think they're incorporating more role-playing mechanics in their games, as they have over time, is because of that problem of not being able to follow through with a well-written story that keeps you captivated from beginning to end. Characters that have a quality standard where there's a threshold and no one really goes below it. That's one of their biggest problems. Is they have good characters like the Seeds from Far Cry 5, but they have a bunch of characters in the game that are cringy or poorly voice acted or poorly written or flat. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in Far Cry games, where it's that consistency that they have a problem with, and it's been that way, since the first game. It's true for Far Cry 2, 3, 4, 5, especially with New Dawn, and with this game in particular, with Far Cry 6, I don't really think that that's going to change, because the big question is whether they've actually learned from their previous mistakes, and with New Dawn, the answer was no. They went straight into New Dawn from Far Cry 5, and it was an unmitigated disaster. It's the worst game in the series, assuming that the one that was based in the Stone Age or whatever it was, the one that I didn't fucking play and never will and have no interest in playing, and it seems like I'm not alone in that. I can't really speak to how good or bad that game was, but I can say that a lot of people didn't play it, as far as I'm aware. I don't even remember the name of it. And that just kind of goes to show you how forgettable that game was. And the people who I know that have played it have said that it's okay, but that's unfortunately one of the issues with Ubisoft, where it's okay doesn't really cut it. Far Cry 5 was better than okay, but the problem is that you had a good game that was weighed down by so much baggage and bad elements and underdevelopment, that in sort of quasi-woke aspects that just weighed it down, that unfortunately the game is just kind of okay generally, not because I didn't like it, but because there's so much wrong with it that you can't really just stand there and say that it's an objectively good game. There's objectively good elements of it, but there's so much about it that just is just so flat, so boring, so uninspired, that to me, it's even as someone who liked the game, you would have to be just lying about the content of the game to say that it doesn't have an unbelievable amount of problems as just a standalone game, and that the game itself jumped the shark and had nowhere to go, and that is just evident with New Dawn, which was abysmal. That's been one of the main issues with Ubisoft and with Far Cry as a series, as a franchise, that they don't really seem to understand what makes the game worth playing. They don't really seem to understand what they can do to innovate a formula, but at the same time not change enough to where people basically walk away from it. And with Far Cry 6, my initial feeling is that they are being very safe with what they're doing with it. That comes across to me with the gameplay that was released today and the trailers and that, and them discussing the game. They are being safe with this game, at least from what they've portrayed thus far. You never know what they got in their back pocket. You never know what they're going to pull out and basically run a risk with. They always do that with these games. But my initial feelings with Far Cry 5 were a lot more passionate than with Far Cry 6. I don't really have a very strong feeling one way or the other with this. And with the game itself, I'm probably just going to wait to release day and then just see what people say about it and then decide one way or another whether to buy it or not. To me, it's just one of those kind of games where it might be fun if I'm bored in October and I got nothing else going on, that maybe I buy this game because it could be a decent game, like Far Cry 5 was. I'm not ashamed to have bought Far Cry 5. A lot of people see every Ubisoft game as just shovelware, and that might be true about the Assassin's Creed series at this point, because as far as I know, I don't really see anyone saying that Valhalla was worth a shit at all. So I never bought it for that reason. If everyone just concludes that it's a piece of shit, then I'm not going to buy it. And if people come to that same conclusion with Far Cry 6, then I won't buy it. And I would say that for those of you listening to this, that's what I would recommend for you. Is I'm not going to tell you to go buy the game. I'm not going to tell you not to buy the game, at least for the time being. Because the question when it comes to Ubisoft is not a matter of whether the game has woke content. It's how much woke content is in the game. I know that Ubisoft likes to portray itself as trying to play the line, but it's very clear to me that they have, it's like every studio. They have a woke element within the development team. They have woke managers that are pushing down from the top for them to do this kind of shit, and so it's just going to happen. It reminds me of the episode of Chernobyl.
It's the end of the month. All the productivity quotas. Everyone's working overtime. The factories need power. Someone's pushing down from above. Not that we'll ever know who.
Where the bureaucrats, the apparatchiks, are basically saying that someone's pushing down from the top for us to keep the power running. So we have to kind of play fast and loose with the rules and take a serious risk to get everything done that we want to get done for really lazy and selfish reasons and cowardly reasons. And Ubisoft, to me, feels that same way, that it's this kind of dispassionate acceptance of crap that they have to force into their games that they just put in and they run a risk. And so right from the beginning, it's like, okay, well, you went from displaying the male Danny, who's the protagonist, to making it all about the female Danny. And you're portraying her as though this is like the canon character in the game. This is the canon protagonist of the game. This is the character that you should care about. And it's like, okay, then, is your game woke?
No. It's not at all what you think.
And the response is, from Ubisoft, as it has been for a while, it's the Randy Marsh who, when he's trying to get Whole Foods, I think, and in his town, and he just is like, no, listen, we're not woke, we're not trying to make it political, we're not trying to force feed you a narrative. And one of the things is that it's not even to say that there's necessarily no woke content in the game, and they're not even claiming as much, which I think if they did, it would just be a lie, because for every Ubisoft game, there is going to be woke shit in it. I can't think of an Ubisoft game since, I don't even know how long I'd have to go back, where it didn't have woke crap in it. And so it's just one of those things of, well, Ubisoft, how much woke crap do you have forced into this fucking game? Is it enough that it's going to push me not to buy it? Or is it just, enough to check enough boxes to make your managers happy? Is that, because to me, that's what it is. It's not even like the outside, and I've been told this by developers from big name studios, that it isn't even like the journos or the fucking retards on Twitter. It's the managers. The managers are telling them to put this shit in the game. So the creative director's coming up with the vision for the game, and he has people above him coming down saying, no, you need to do this, you need to check that box, you need to do this. And so that's what they do. They just check the box, and they put these characters in, they put this crap in, and it falls fucking flat because they don't care about it. They're not in any way passionate about it, and so when it's put in the game, it's either irritating, just slightly grating, or it's just flat. It's just uninspired crap. And I mean, I could go through a list of examples of that, but I'm not even going to bother, because I just think that if you've played these games, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Woke characters that feel shoehorned in, that don't fit the setting, and they have no real character, and either they're grating because of the annoying shit they do or say, or they are just flat. They are boring, uninspired characters, or it's content, and it just goes nowhere. And that's not good, because you can tell with these games, especially with Far Cry 5 is a good example of this, you can tell what they actually cared about. You can tell the characters they put, time into. You can tell the content that actually was part of the vision that they had for the game itself, like on the whole. But it's all the other additional shit that they just force into it that weighs the rest of it down. And unfortunately, most of the developers at these studios are just cowards. And they're just unwilling to say no to the managers demanding that they put this shit in the game. And they're also, unfortunately not passionate enough about their vision that even if they can't say no, they don't invest enough time and effort into making the content that they have to put in worth putting in. It's like they leave it to be shit as like some sort of form of protest, but it's like, as a person playing the game, it doesn't really help me or do anything for me to have this shit content in the game that you just put no time and effort into, that it feels forced, and you were likely forced into doing it. But at the very minimum, you could try to put some effort in, try to reframe it, try to rewrite it, try to do something with it to make it, even if it is just, filler crap that you are forced to put in for the whole issue of virtue signaling in your game, at least make it something that isn't just garbage or a dead weight to the game itself. Even if you have to do it and it's not part of the vision that you have, at least try to put some extra effort in to salvage what you got overall. That, to me, was one of the biggest problems with Far Cry 5, was the crap that was loaded into it that very clearly had no passion behind it. No effort was given. It was put in, it was included, and that was it. And it's like, listen, this game could have been good, but you had so much dead weight that you didn't work with, that you didn't develop properly, that you didn't actually, bring to its conclusion and actually make it actually fully fulfilled within the setting and, the element of the game itself, that it's just, like I say, it's just dead weight. It's content that if it was cut, no one would have noticed. It would have helped the game in some capacity, some elements of Far Cry 5. If they would have just cut it out, it would have helped the game itself. And unfortunately, they didn't. And that's the big fear that I have for Far Cry 6, is that they are clearly, in my view, from what's been portrayed, trying to make a safer game. They ran into a lot of controversy with Far Cry 5, and they really ran into a roadblock when it came to Far Cry New Dawn. That game was a disaster for them. It was a disaster for the franchise. And I would imagine that they had to have rethought what they actually want to do in the future for these games, for this franchise, because there's no way, and I haven't even seen anything that would actually show that they're going to double down on that kind of stylization, that kind of setting, that kind of game, that kind of element. Everything that was wrong with Far Cry New Dawn was a combination of just lazy writing, lazy storytelling, bad characters, borrowing heavily from Far Cry 5, and not doing anything with it. So uninspired, so insipid and lazy. Tons of woke garbage in New Dawn. It's just everything. Everything that was wrong with Far Cry 5 just turned up, just made worse. And the issue is that with these games, you can only do so much with FPS. And that's been one of the main complaints that I see from people, is that it's just more repetitive shooter stuff. That's the content of the game. You run around, you kill guys, you invade bases, you liberate places, yada yada. You progress through the story, you take down the bad guy. And I agree with the criticism that says that they have to mix it up. The issue is, honestly, though, how much can they mix that up? And are they really going to do that with this game? I tend to say that they're going to add more mods and shit. That appears to be the angle they're taking, is, well, we're going to give you standard stock weaponry, but we're going to let you mod it and do all this crazy stuff to it. And also mod your character. Is that really that inspired? No, but it's pretty much what you got to work with. You know, it's what you got. And unfortunately, gameplay-wise, you can't really do much more than what you already have. You know, you're going to be able to fly around in planes. You're going to fly around in helicopters. They put in a horse, so you can ride around on a horse now, but you're going to be able to drive cars and all that. They have really peaked on what they can do with vehicles, generally speaking, and with shooting, generally speaking, and with combat, generally speaking. They must know this. They must know this. And so I think that, unfortunately, with that, my hopes are not really high that they're going to be able to work with that to the degree that it isn't going to feel very similar to Far Cry 5 or Far Cry 4 or Far Cry 3. The only criticism that I would have is that I enjoyed the sort of like supernatural aspects of 3 and 4 and the knife gameplay of 3 and 4, and they got rid of that largely in 5, and I don't really see many signs that that's coming back in 6, and maybe that's just a consequence of that, of them not being able to figure out an AI that can bridge the gap between sort of like mindless FPS people that play a game for 25 hours and then drop it and never play it again, and the people that actually want to invest some time into a game. Like, I've beaten Far Cry 5 4 times, I think, so I've probably put much more time into the game than your average buyer. With most of these games, the people who play them don't finish them. And that's been true for every one of these games, and that's been true for, especially for any of the role-playing games that come out. Going all the way back to Mass Effect, most people that play RPGs don't finish them. Most people that play even shooters like this, except for like the Call of Duty ones that are like 9 hours long, most people don't finish them. And the issue is trying to correct that. And it's a question of if they're even trying. I don't really know that they are. It's just one of those things that I have to imagine it's being talked about internally. But the thing that I would say that goes against the idea that they're actually learning with these titles, and I know that it's not all the same people, not all the same teams, but it is a sort of corporate consciousness. It's a corporate culture, a corporate environment. You go back to, what was it, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I had this article saved for the longest time, where the director at Ubisoft behind Assassin's Creed Odyssey was shocked to learn that overwhelmingly, his overwhelming male player base played the male protagonist in Odyssey, whose name I don't... Alexios, instead of Cassandra. And he was shocked to learn this, when it's like, even in this article, it cites the same source that I have saved, and I've had saved for an incredibly long time, years and years, because these numbers, as far as I'm aware, have not shifted at all in 20 fucking years. And I stand by that amount of time. People will contest this, but I stand by that these numbers have not changed outside of 1 to 2% in 20 fucking years. The fact is that in 20 years, regardless of what Ubisoft game we are fucking talking about, the people that are playing these games are overwhelmingly, near totality, men. It is men that are playing these games. And so you get back to, well, you're making it seem like the star of the fucking game is, in the canon protagonist, is this female character. Are you being woke there, Ubisoft?
No. Hold on. Soda.
And I honestly don't think that they're trying to be that way. I don't think that they're trying to be woke. I do think they are virtue signaling. but I don't know why. I don't know if it's just simply someone else within the company, higher up, that's making these advertising decisions, but it's not appealing. It's not appealing to your player base. It's not appealing to new customers. It's not appealing to anyone outside of a fringe minority of people. And this has always been true. This has been a fact for 20 years, that even if you have the option in games for you to play a different protagonist, a female protagonist, to have character customization, overwhelmingly, it is men playing the game, and if you have a female option, it is men playing that option, and those group of people are very, very small. It is a very small, exceptionally few amount of people that I am included in that care about that option. And while I appreciate that option being in the game, because most of the time I would say I choose the female option, not every time, but most of the time it depends on the setting in the game, and sort of basically what kind of game you're playing as well. But it's an option that I appreciate, that some of us do appreciate, but we are clearly the minority. And that has always been true. That has been true for 20 years of development and evolution and all this and that in the game industry. We are the very small minority. And the fact is that the people that are going to play your game, Ubisoft, are men. And they're going to choose the male option. That is just a fact. That is just the nature of these games. That is the nature of Ubisoft's audience. That is the nature of gaming generally. And it just begs a certain question of why you choose to do this. And the character that I would imagine is going to be flat, that is going to be boring, that is going to be a woke insert, is going to be the female gorilla. I think her last name is Garcia. That's been shown so far. I think that's going to be her character. Boring, insert, female, woke gorilla, virtue signal on Twitter. Look at how woke we are. The manager, my boss told me to do this, so I got down on my knees and said, yes, sir. Sir, yes, sir, I'm going to put this in the game. But I'm not going to put any time into it. I'm not going to invest any kind of effort into this character. And it's just going to be like, what's her face? Grace from Far Cry 5. Just boring. Just boring, flat. Not grating, not irritating, but just nothing. I have no feelings one way or another. And thank God you got another boring character in this game to weigh it down. That's my feeling on Far Cry 6, is they're going to save the investment for characters that they have as a part of the vision they have for the game. Those are the characters that are going to be invested in. But the characters that they've been forced to include are just going to be boring, just vanilla oatmeal shit. Just trash. And do not add to the game. Actively take away from the game. Because where you could have had a very good character, whether it's entertaining, funny, whatever, interesting, whatever you want to, whatever spin you want to have on the character you put in, I think that's going to be one of the issues with this game as well, is they had characters that they could have made interesting, but they were forced to put in boring, stock, woke, female empowerment shit, and it's just going to be dead air, white noise, tedium, where nothing is invested in it, and all the while, the people that are working on this game, that are actually making the game, are like, no, guys, we're not woke, listen, we don't have an agenda, we're not trying to push politics, yada, 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 because they know it's not a selling point. All this woke crap that is put in these games does not sell these games. It creates a negative controversy around it that does not sell titles. I'm not going to go as far as to say get woke, go broke, but these elements that they force into the games do not sell copies. And if they are flagrant or offensive enough, then you will lose sales as a direct result. And being that the last game that Ubisoft put out with Far Cry was an utter fucking dud, a bomb beyond belief, I would be very surprised if they actually did go fully woke with this title. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to play it safe because every sign so far says that, okay, let's bring in an actor. Okay, this guy was from fucking Breaking Bad. Let's bring this guy in. He'll be the villain. You know, we'll have the cutesy shit. We'll have the humorous shit like we have in the last several games. It feels very safe. The setting feels very safe. The fact that they're trying not to make a big deal about the politics. They're, already navigating the landmines where they even had it with Far Cry 5, where in the end it was nothing. There was no real, really offensive amount of shit with it. It was just them coming up with an idea, trying to implement it. It was a lot safer than the controversy that was originally around it. And with this game, it's already fairly inoffensive just out of the gate. It feels very safe, and that's not very good. It's not to say it can't be a good game, but it is to say that usually a game that plays it safe is just kind of blah. And generally that's true. And unfortunately with Ubisoft, they don't have a good track record of sort of like getting up and over the gap of blah, that most of their games are blah. And you really have to struggle to find a reason to continue playing them. Once you get past the sort of shiny new coat of paint, it's really hard to get past that point and keep chugging along and keep playing. Even with Far Cry 5, the only reason I beat it 5 times was the factors of the game that I found fun. And that was just running around with your random companions that you can recruit. Not that, like, a lot of the companions that they had that were part of the story, I did not like. A lot of them. And I would just run around the game with random people that I would pick up from bases. I just find some random people roaming around, and I'd be like, well, this guy looks kind of cool, or this girl looks pretty cool. I like their weapon. I like their skills. Let's bring him in. And it's like they can, throw you ammo or whatever, and it's like, cool. I like this character. They're actually far better than all these other assholes that the game wants you to play with, but just suck. Whatever his name was, the guy who would just roam around in his fucking plane and not do shit. It's like, wow, are you useless? There were several characters like that where they were just useless. And the more useful companions that you could have are literally just random people that you would find. And they would have like banter. It was good. Like it was surprising to me that the characters they actually designed to be your companions sucked ass. But the random people that you would pick up and just make part of your team, they were actually more useful, more interesting, would handle themselves better in a gunfight. And so the issue is that it's a problem with the characters they designed, yes, but at the very minimum, the companions that they included with you held their own enough that it wasn't a detriment to the game. So Far Cry 5, a mixed bag of a game, but more good than bad. A decent amount of bad, but not enough that to me it sinks the fucking game. With Far Cry 5 in particular, though, the real question is whether they're going to be able to actually, fix so many of those errors that they've made with their previous games. And, I mean, if I wanted to be optimistic, maybe if they're trying to make it smaller, they're trying to make it safer, they're investing more in something that's more of a safer vision, it might give them more room to move around where they won't feel the need to go so far over the top and jump the shark so much like they did in 5. They went so way over the top in fucking 5. It was unbelievable. And like I said on Twitter, they just couldn't stick the landing. Like, if you go over the top, you got that crazy-ass ending and all that jazz, you gotta stick that landing, and I don't think they did. And with this safe game that they're coming out with, maybe this is where they're going to say, okay, we kind of fucked up in these last 2 games. A lot of people liked 5, but New Dawn was a total dud, and the fact is that you can't just turn up the contrast, you can't just turn up the color, you can't just keep doing the same shit and just shovel in all the crap you had from your previous game into the next. It doesn't work that way. You can't just cram all this in and hope it works. You got to really think about what setting you're creating, the characters in it that inhabit it. You have to actually put consideration into the content you're creating. And my hope is, being that they've had more time to develop this game because of COVID, and that they are at least offering you the idea that this is going back to basically what Far Cry 4 was, but they're doing so in such a way that they are confident in their position that this is going to be their best game, because that's what they're claiming so far, is that this is going to be their best title. And yes, you can say that they say that about every one of their titles, but they usually have to play off of something. They usually have to play off like an incredible protagonist or antagonist. They have to play off a setting. They have to play off, these big themes and all that they're going to stuff into the game, and the craziness that's going on. They're not really doing that so much with this game. It seems like slightly more realistic, slightly more grounded. To me, it's either going to be a very blah game, and I hope not, or it's going to be a game where they actually take a step back from Far Cry 5, and especially from New Dawn, and realize, we got to actually have some kind of bite to this. We actually have to have some kind of appeal to this outside of being so over the top that it's basically, a meme game. And with this game so far, they could always have it in their back pocket, but they're not doing that with this game so far. It's way more grounded than what 4 was initially. Far Cry 4 was very over the top right from the beginning. The first fucking trailer is where you have Pagan Min, or whatever his name was, stabbing his fucking, guard or one of his soldiers in the throat with his pen, and just being way over the fucking top. And with this particular game, it seems much more grounded than those ones. And I don't know that it's going to be good in the end, but I'm hopeful at the minimum that they're going to take this opportunity to learn from the mistakes that they've had in the past, and to actually, if they are going to make a more serious game, despite the sort of standard Ubisoft Far Cry sort of schlock of goofy characters they include in that, for whatever reason, I don't really find it offensive, so it's fine. That aside from that aspect, and some of the aspects of the game, they're going to be over the top, which is fine. I mean, it's part of what made Far Cry 5 fun, was some of those aspects. That they come up with, in my hope, that it's a more serious story that has more serious development to it. They've been playing with that basically since 3, where they have the two endings. In 5, it was a false choice, honestly. There's 3 endings in that game, and all of them were just kind of ass. But 4, they played with it as well. It didn't work out. Fuck if I know what happened in New Dawn. But they've been really playing with that. And in my view, the only game that actually did it fairly well, in terms of being a definitive ending for the game, was 3. 3 was, in my view, the only game where you had that black or white kind of ending. And it actually suited the game, in my view. The general theme of the game, it actually suited it. Of basically being lost in the fog, the miasma of that environment, or, regaining your control on reality and choosing to be the hero. 3, in my view, is the only game that actually got it. That it sort of synced together. 4 did not. They tried to make it a moral issue of, you choose one side, but they're both bad. Spare me. freshman 101 writing shit. That's stupid. And in 5, unfortunately, they essentially had only really one ending. And again, it just jumped the fucking shark. And I understand, like, the context of why they had that ending. I understand in terms of the setting, the theme, the story, why they had that ending. But it just felt like really pretentious, really trying to create a reaction, which it did for a day. And then it was a wet fart. So you fucked up on that. I did not like the ending of Far Cry 5. It could have been better of, like, you know, other than the nuke ending, you had the indoctrination ending. They could have really leaned into that and made it better, which would have been basically ripped right out of Far Cry fucking 3, but they didn't. It was really half-assed, and it just ends just out of nowhere, and, you know, wet fart. Even more so than the actual ending, like the canological ending, I guess, because it plays in a New Dawn. Yeah, so writing-wise, they have never been able to stick the landing outside of, I want to say, 3. 3 is the only one where, in my view, they actually... The ending of the game synced with the game itself, and it has to. 5, to me, was pretentious. They just did that for shock value. And in 4, they tried to do it as well, and it just didn't work. I mean, if fucking BioShock can do this, so can they. I mean, with BioShock in particular, 1, 2, everything other than Infinite, they had several endings, and they all had their own reason for existing. And say whatever you want to about Ken Levine and the BioShock franchise. You know, RIP. I appreciated the endings of the first and the second game. I very much appreciated them. And as much as people shit on 2, I ain't going to shit on the endings of 2. I like the endings of 2. There's several of them, and they're all pretty good. So, 2 generally, but I think it was 6 total, I think. I can't remember, 5 total. But if BioShock can do it, so can you. Give us some kind of a conclusion to these games where you go back to 3 and it's actually relevant to the character. You got to make it about the character. You're playing this character for 25 hours or 30 hours or however long you're playing these games. Make it about the character, not about your half-assed fucking pretentious themes like you did in 4 and 5. Don't do that again. Stop it. It doesn't fucking work. Go back to making it about the player character's place in the fucking world. And I think with this particular game, because you're not so generic of a character, you're an actual character, there is a chance that they could go back and make that the actual narrative. You have a beginning, you have a middle, you have a conclusion. It is based around your character, the setting, your involvement in the story. Please, for the love of God, go back to that. Make it about you. Not just about you, but in the end, it comes down to a series of choices that you've made or are about to make or whatever, and that the conclusion is based off of your behavior, your choices, and not just, well, see, I am the Messiah, I am a prophet, no matter what you did, this is the way things go. Oh my God, there's an article on IGN about the story and people are tweeting about it. Fuck off with that ending from Far Cry 5. Most of you listening to this are going to say, Louis, you're putting in way too much time and effort as it relates to this. You know, it's just shovelware, it's just Ubisoft. Who cares? You know, don't have any hope, give up, etc. And I want to make it very clear that, like I said, basically from the onset, I am not pre-ordering this game, and my position on it is that I have mixed feelings about it, and that I will likely wait to release to even decide whether I'm going to buy it or not. Because, like I've already said, they always have something in their back pocket, and it could be woke garbage, even though they're claiming otherwise. And I will wait and see, and that is what I advise you to do. But as always, I just want the video game industry to improve. And I hate playing games where I feel like it could have been so much better. And Far Cry 5 is no greater example of that than Far Cry 5. It is a game that could have been fucking fantastic, but in the end is just kind of okay. Because there's so many elements in it that are just weighing it down. You got 3 main antagonists that I enjoy, that I like, that I appreciate. You have characters in the game that I like, that I appreciate. You know, there's so much about 5 that I enjoyed. but there's also so much about it that just weighed it down. There was so much baggage with that game. And it's like all the funny elements, the over-the-top elements that are fun and are enjoyable that people like, that I like, it all got weighed down. And in the end, it's just kind of an okay game. And I think objectively, that is the case with it. And my hope with Far Cry 6 is that they keep the funny aspects. You know, they already have the Macarena gun in the fucking game.
Some very unique, deadly weapons.
And it's been a long time since I've heard that fucking song. It has been a long time since I've heard that. And I remember when I was a little kid in private school dancing, or in church school, dancing to that fucking song with like 50 other kids my age. And man, that was a long fucking time ago. That was a long time ago. I was a child, and I still remember dancing to that fucking song. So that is like a fucking millennial moment. I'm having like Vietnam flashbacks of the Macarena. So I'm not even put off. I'm not even put off by shit like that in this game, even though it's over the top and goofy in that. There's always been that kind of component to these games, and I'm fine with that, but you gotta have more than just that to these games. You can't just have these funny things you come up with in a writer's room and implement in the game because they're fun, but you got all this shit weighing down your game. You gotta focus on the core of the game being good. You gotta work with the minutia of the shooter aspect that people are bored with, and that to me I'm honestly bored with as well. That it's hard for me to get past. You know, even the last Call of Duty game, which, you know, ended before it went to a third act, I didn't hate that game. You know, I was surprised that it's like, wow, the people that are making Call of Duty, Activision is actively learning. They're not learning in every way, but they're literally changing their game to make it more narrative-based, and it's becoming better. Is it good enough? Does it pass the smell test? No, because you don't even have a third act, you assholes. Write a third act for your game. But it's like, at least there's improvement. At least I've seen improvement in Call of Duty. And the question is, you know, if Activision can improve Call of Duty, Ubisoft, your games are very narrative heavy. You got to actually put in the effort. But I will leave it there. Thank you for listening.